Okay guys, so this is going to be naming ionic and covalent compounds. So we're going to be working backwards, okay? So the first type of compound we're going to be dealing with is called a binary ionic compound, okay? That means that we have two elements, okay? Binary means two, and ionic means you have a metal and a non-metal, or a positive charge and a negative charge, okay? So the first element is always to the, that's not right. That's a typo. I've corrected that, sorry. To the left of the zigzag line. Okay, I need to correct that. Let me put that on my notes really quick. Okay, so the first element is always to the left of the zigzag line. So when we do this, we write the name of the cation followed by the name of the anion. But with the anion, we end it in IDE. So what I like to say is, if it's on the periodic table, like oxygen, we end that ion as oxide. Okay, we change it to an IDE ending. So this is fluoride, chloride, bromide, iodide, sulfide, phosphide, that sort of thing. Okay, so I say if it's on the periodic table, it ends in IDE. So NaCl is sodium chloride. ALN is aluminum nitride. Okay, if a cation has more than one charge, so it's a transition metal, a Roman numeral is used. The Roman numeral represents the oxidation number or the charge. Okay, so oxidation number is just a fancy word for charge. Okay, that's written really bad. I need to go change that too whenever I go do that. So we have CuSO4. Okay, copper is one of those transition metals we highlighted. Okay. So if our first element is one of the ones we highlighted, we need to pump our brakes, okay? And we have to determine the charge, okay? Sulfate is SO4. It always has a -2 charge, okay? So there's no crisscross going on. So this has to be a +2 charge because they have to be equal and opposite charges. So we name this copper 2 sulfate, okay? So we only use Roman numerals with transition metals. So the ones we highlighted on our periodic table. Here are some of the examples of those. We have more than that highlighted, so just keep that in mind. Okay, binary molecular compound. So a molecular compound is going to be dealing with two nonmetals, okay? So the first element is to the right of the zigzag line. So we're going to use prefixes, okay? So we keep the root of the first one, so N2O5. So we have two nitrogens, so the prefix for 2 is di. We keep the root, nitrogen. And pent, prefix for pent is 5, oxide, okay? And we change the IDE ending, okay? Carbon monoxide, so carbon is the first element. We have one of those, so we don't say monocarbon, we just say carbon. And then we have one oxygen, so it's monoxide. Okay, and then we use those rules whenever they are to the right of the zigzag line, the first element. Okay, so keep that in mind. We got to locate it first. Ternary ionic compounds means that there's 3 different types of elements in a compound. It's pretty much the same rules. Na2SO4. Let's look at that one. Okay. First thing I like to do is I like to write my charges. So +1. Is sodium's charge, and sulfate is -2. Where does this 2 come from? We don't say it's disodium sulfate. The 2 comes from the crisscross. So that's why I know why we have this subscript of 2, and the 1 would crisscross over here. So this is just sodium sulfate. Now, we don't use Roman numerals because it's not a transition metal. Sodium always has a +1 charge. Okay, and we already did copper 2 sulfate. So I'll make those corrections before I post your notes and you see these videos. So bear with me on that, going through and winging it. So let's go to our example problems. Okay, so first step when we do these problems is we are going to write our charges, okay? Zinc always has a +2 charge. ClO3 is chlorate. It's chlorate, okay? So The 2 goes down here when we crisscross, and the 1 goes over here. Zinc is not a transition metal. It always has a +2 charge. So this is just zinc chlorate. Like that. Okay, P4S7. Okay, P is phosphorus, S is sulfur. Okay, so P is to the right of the zigzag line. So we have to use prefixes. So we're going to use tetra, keep the element name, phosphorus. Prefix for 7 is hept, hepta, sulfide. Okay, so we change it to an IDE ending. Okay, Li is lithium. Lithium has a +1 charge. Cr2O7 is dichromate. It has a -2 charge. So if we were to reverse the crisscross, you know, that's where those numbers come from. Okay, so this is just lithium dichromate. Okay, CrCl3. Okay, Cr is chromium. So we're going to go to our periodic table. Chromium is one of the ones we highlighted. So it's going to have a Roman numeral. Okay, so how do I get that charge? Well, chlorine always has a -1 charge. And if I wanted to crisscross or reverse the crisscross, this 3 would go back up here. So that's what I call reversing the crisscross. Okay, so you can do it like that, or we can do it an alternative way. We can say 3 times a -1 is a -3. How do I get to 0? Well, I would add 3. Okay, so you can either reverse the crisscross or you can do it like that. 3 times a -1 is a -3. -3 plus 3 gives us 0 because the net charge on a compound is always 0. Okay, so this is chromium, Roman numeral 3, chloride. Okay, the Roman numerals is what's going to get you. Okay, so we're going to do lots of practice with that. P2O3. P is to the right of the zigzag line, so we have to use our non-metal rules. So this is going to be diphosphorus. Oxygen, we got trioxide. Okay, the prefix for 3 is tri. Okay, SnCrO4. Sn is tin. Okay, so tin is one of the ones we highlighted. It's going to be a transition metal. It's going to have multiple charges. So we have to get its charge. Okay, CrO4 is chromate. Chromate always has a -2 charge. Okay, so if this has a -2 charge, this has to have a +2 charge because there's no crisscross going on down there. So this is going to be tin, Roman numeral 2, chromate. Next one, mercury is Hg. NO3 is nitrate, okay? Hg is one of the ones that have multiple charges. Okay, so we're gonna have to reverse the crisscross to figure out what the charge is. So nitrate always has a -1 charge. So I'm gonna reverse the crisscross and I'm gonna bring the 2 up here. So this becomes mercury, Roman numeral 2, nitrate. Okay, if you want to do the multiplication little rule, you would say 2 times a -1 is a -2. How do I get to 0? You add 2. I2O4. I is to the right of the zigzag line. It's right here. So we have to use prefix rules. So this is going to be diiodine, tetra, oxide. Okay, so the prefix for 4 is tetra, and we change it to the IDE ending. KBr, okay, symbol for K is potassium, okay, it has a +1 charge. Bromine, bromide, -1 charge, so this is potassium bromide. Okay, symbol for Ba is barium. Barium always has a +2 charge. Oxygen, oxide is a -2 charge. So we do barium oxide. Okay, so we always keep the root of the first one and we end it in IDE on the second one. P2O5. P is to the right of the zigzag line, so we're going to have to use prefixes. So prefix for 2 is diphosphorus. Prefix for 5 is pent oxide. If you put pentaoxide, that's also acceptable, but they usually don't write two vowels next to each, like A and O next to each other. So just keep that in mind. I'm not going to count off for that if you wrote it like that. Okay, next one. Li has a +1 charge, lithium. F is fluoride. Okay, it has a -1 charge. So this is lithium fluoride. A lot of people mess up on the spelling of fluoride. It's FLUO. Okay. HgCl2. Okay, we already know from previous examples that mercury is a transition metal. So we got to figure out the charge. So chlorine always has a -1 charge. So 2 times a -1 is a -2. So to get to 0, this has to be a +2. Or we can simply reverse the crisscross. Okay? So this is going to be mercury 2, chloride. Okay? Once again, mercury is one of the highlighted transition metals, so we have to use Roman numerals when we do that. Okay. On to the back. Next page. Okay. NH4 is ammonium. It has a +1 charge. NO2 is nitrite. It has a -1 charge. So this is ammonium nitrite. Okay. BaCr2O7. Ba is barium. It has a +2 charge. Cr2O7 is dichromate. It has a -2 charge. So this is barium dichromate. Okay. CrOH3. Okay. So chromium is Cr. It's one of the ones we highlighted, so we have to use Roman numerals. Okay. OH is hydroxide. It always has a -1 charge. Okay, so we can reverse the crisscross. We get this a +3. Or we can do 3 times a -1 is a -3. How do we get to 0? We add 3. So this is going to be chromium, Roman numeral 3, hydroxide. Like that. CO2. Carbon is to the right of the zigzag line. Okay, it's to the right of the zigzag line. So we have to use prefixes. So we write the element of the first name. We have one of them, so we just write carbon, O2. Prefix for that is dioxide. Okay, 18. Al2S3. Symbol for Al is aluminum. Okay, aluminum always has a +3 charge. Sulfide is S. It always has a -2 charge. Okay, so if we're looking where these subscripts come from, they come from the crisscross. Okay, so this is just aluminum, sulfide. Okay, Ca is calcium. It always has a +2 charge. Nitrate is NO3 with a -1 charge. So if I was to crisscross, that's where those subscripts come from. So this is just calcium, nitrate. FeCl3. Fe is iron. Iron is one of the ones we highlighted on our periodic table. So it's going to have Roman numerals when we name this. So chlorine always has a -1 charge. It's chloride. So 3 times a -1 is a -3. So this has to be a +3 to get it to 0. Or I can simply reverse the crisscross. So this becomes iron 3, chloride. Okay, Ni is nickel. Let's go look and see if nickel is a transition metal. Yep, it is, and it's one of the ones we highlighted. So it has multiple charges. Oh, that's a typo. Sorry, it's typo. That should be a 2. I'll fix that. Sorry, I typed these up kind of quickly. So that should be a 2. Okay, so we're going to reverse the crisscross. So nickel would have a +2 charge. Phosphate would have a -3 charge. Okay, so this is going to be nickel, Roman numeral 2, phosphate. Okay, P. P is to the right of the zigzag line, so we're going to use non-metal rules. So we're going to use our prefixes. So this is going to be phosphorus, tribromide. Prefix for 3 is tri. NaHCO3. So Na is going to be sodium. Sodium always has a +1 charge. The ion HCO3 is bicarbonate or hydrogen carbonate, however you want to name it. Okay, they're equal and opposite, so we don't see any charges being crisscrossed. So this is just sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. Okay, K2SO4. K is potassium. It always has a +1 charge. Sulfate is SO4 with a -2 charge. So when we go to crisscross, if we were to crisscross, this 2 comes from there. The 1, remember when we crisscross a 1 to a polyatomic ion, we don't use parentheses. It's not a transition metal, so we don't use Roman numerals. So this is just potassium sulfate. Okay, last one. Fe is iron. Iron is a transition metal. Okay, it's one of the ones we highlighted. So it's going to have Roman numerals. So this is CO3 is carbonate. It has a -2 charge. So this one has to have a +2 charge because there's no crisscross going on. Okay, so this is iron 2, carbonate. Now, one thing I'm going to talk about real quick with your ion chart is on the, occasionally you're going to see some Latin names that come up like ferrous, ferric, plumbus, plumbic, that sort of thing. I don't really use Latin names whenever I name stuff. So if we're doing things like that, I'll help you out. I know some other teachers use the Latin names, but I don't really find any use for them. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm going to make corrections to these notes, and they'll be all corrected for you whenever you see them. Thanks. Have a good one.